Hello, and welcome to the Mind Care Matters podcast. My name is Ann Murphy, and I'm sitting in the interviewer chair for this episode. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Psychiatric Rehabilitation and Counseling Professions at Rutgers University, and I'm the director of the Northeast and Caribbean Mental Health Technology Transfer Center. I've worked in psychiatric rehabilitation, delivering services, conducting research, teaching students, and training the behavioral health workforce for over 20 years. You may be wondering, where's this podcast's usual host, Dr. Michelle Zechner? Well, she's here with me, but we're turning the tables today, and I'll be interviewing Michelle and learning more about one of her areas of expertise. If you don't already know, Dr. Michelle Zechner, who uses she, her pronouns, is an associate professor at Rutgers University in the Department of Psychiatric Rehabilitation and Counseling Professions, along with me. Dr. Zechner teaches, conducts research on aging and wellness, and focuses on interprofessional collaboration to improve the health care of people living with serious mental health conditions. She developed one of the first undergraduate courses on aging and psychiatric rehabilitation. Michelle is active in mental health workforce development, including presenting at national and international conferences, and has written extensively on aging for people living with mental health conditions. Welcome, Michelle. You've done such a wonderful job interviewing others about their expertise, and I'm so happy to have the opportunity to speak with you today and allow you to share some of your expertise with our listeners.
Hey, Anne, I have to admit, it's only just a little bit awkward, but I'm happy to be here.
Well, hopefully the awkwardness will go down here as we get into what you love to talk about. So today we're going to talk about aging with serious mental health conditions. Can you tell me a bit about this topic and provide a bit of an overview for our listeners?
Yeah, and it's fun to be able to talk about this passion of mine. It turns out that I think most of us know that the US population is getting older as a whole. And this means that about 5% of each cohort of folks, each generation, are living with a serious mental health condition like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, major depression, or major anxiety. And what we do know about people who are aging with serious mental health conditions is that they don't necessarily have good services that intersect with them. So when people are aging, they may age out of the housing services that they receive, and community mental health services may not have programming dedicated to their needs. And aging services aren't really comfortable working with people with mental health conditions. So it's kind of a siloed approach to care. So it's kind of a challenge. We also know that people aging with mental health conditions are likely to experience significant health concerns and be impacted by decades of care in a formal mental health system. Just even the medications over decades can cause health problems. And we really need more programs and services targeted to improving not only health outcomes, but also quality of life and joy and happiness for people living with mental health conditions as they age.
So it sounds like it's a really challenging situation with mental health programs not being able to address adequately the needs of older adults, and older adult programming not being able to address the needs of people with serious mental health conditions. So they're sort of caught in between these two systems of care.
Exactly.
Can you tell us a little bit more about, particularly from the perspective of mental health providers, what should they know or what could they know about people aging into older adulthood with a serious mental health condition that would be helpful?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so anyone who's worked in mental health programming or mental health care are probably aware of this already. But for those of you who haven't seen it yet, often people living with mental health conditions age prematurely, and health conditions related to aging at an even younger age. So we know there's a lot in the literature that talks about people living with mental health conditions who actually have a shortened lifespan or life expectancy. But what we're just learning more about now, and I've done a little bit of research in this area, is to look at the physical functioning of people who are aging with mental health conditions and this discrepancy of what their biological age. So, if a person is 45, but their ability to move or their strength levels or their functioning in the community is actually often 20 to 30 years older than their biological age. So that's really a problem, and this really impacts independent living, quality of life, social supports, and resources. And I think, a lot of the programs that I've seen in the community, and I've done some work in the state hospital systems, we're not always thinking in mental health, oh my goodness, here's a 45-year-old or a 50-year-old. We should be thinking we need to be addressing aging issues. And I hope that, if nothing else, I can leave the listeners with the idea that of that awareness that we should be addressing aging topics at an earlier age with the population. We also really need to think about the adaptations to our services. I know in housing, for example, in New Jersey, it's really hard to get housing, and there are a lot of stairs. We have a lot of old housing stock. And for folks, that may be really, really hard to do those stairs. It may be really hard to do that. So we may need to be thinking about housing, but also people may have cognitive changes that are earlier. So we may have to think about our interventions, like cognitive behavioral therapy is a wonderful evidence-based practice, but it may have to be adapted for people who have some cognitive changes. The good news is that healthy aging is possible when people really focus on maintaining their health, taking actions for quality of life, and thinking about how to improve their physical and mental health and connect to resources to support their independence. So we can definitely promote healthy aging and support healthy aging, but we do have to kind of not say that it's the elephant in the room and admit that we are all getting older, and the folks that we serve and support are getting older, and we need to be thinking about aging and how to support people to age well. One of the things that I've just been working on is peer supports and doing some peer support curriculum, and that is really exciting. And motivational strategies, integrated programs are so helpful. And really a focus on quality of life, I think, is really important for our mental health programming and policies that we should be considering.
I know you did a different episode on peer support. So if people are interested in hearing a little bit more about that, they can listen to that episode. But I'm really just blown away by what you're saying. And I think it's so critical to keep in mind that one's chronological age does not necessarily match, I think you said, their functional age, right? That term functional age, how are they actually living? What is their body and mind? What is the health and state of their body and mind? And how is this impacting how they live? I think that's really, really important for us to keep in mind. I'm curious, what does the research tell us, if anything, about effective services and interventions for this population?
Yeah, there are some limited programming. I've done some research. I'm really interested in the concept of wellness and for people aging with mental health conditions. We've done some articles, a little bit of research on that. And really, it looks like what's out there combines physical and mental health services. So making sure that co-located services are available. Also, many of the programs available, things like cognitive behavioral social skills training. There's a program called FAST, which off the top of my head, I can't remember what it stands for. Most of those include some type of CBT and social skills training. There's also many programs out there. I know that Dartmouth has done a lot of work in this area, and also some folks at UCLA looking at skill development for independent living. So things like communicating with healthcare providers, getting transportation, managing money, coping with symptoms, so that people are able to stay in the community longer. And some of the outcomes that we've seen from those programs include improved independent living and community skills, people better able to manage their health and engage in health programs. There's a little bit out there about employment outcomes and recovery outcomes, like goal attainment. The challenge, however, really is that a lot of the programming that's out there that's targeted for this population is really hard to implement and or access, because a lot of it's proprietary and it's very hard to get that out there. So not a lot of these programs are available in the community right now.
It sounds like there's some hope on the horizon, some new programming getting established, but it's hard to access and isn't readily available. I think just for the listeners, FAST, correct me if I'm wrong, Michelle, functional adaptation skills training.
Thank you.
Sound like it?
That's
okay.
The one.
That's the one. All right. So if individuals are interested in learning more about that particular that intervention, FAST, functional adaptation skills training.
Thanks, Anne. And one other point I want to make about the programs, if people are interested, and I'll make sure that we have it in our blog, but there is a great report by SAMHSA that looks at the evidence of the existing programs that are out there in terms of how effective they are, and the names of all of the different programs. I think there's about 8 programs that have been standardized for the population.
Wonderful. That'll be great for folks to be able to access and learn more. Can you tell us about any new directions or trends related to supporting individuals with serious mental health conditions as they age?
Yeah, if I could circle back though one second and just to talk about programming again, because it is my passion. One thing that I think that we need to do more of is make sure that our programs really are integrated and really touch on all the different areas of the person. And that includes things like spiritual wellness. We've developed this 9 dimensions of aging well for people living with serious mental health conditions that we published a paper about. And we talked about developmental wellness, which is really understanding aging and feeling okay about being an older adult. But I think that spiritual wellness is really, really important because that's about purpose and meaning and connections and why we get out of bed and motivation. And that hasn't been very well talked about. And I think that some of the limitations also just include things that like aging is not sexy. I teach an undergraduate class about aging in psych rehab, and my students are always like, I don't like older people. And I'm like, okay, well, you're in this class now. And yet the more we learn, the more, dedicated we get. To think about it, and in terms of trends to try to move us forward, and even more interesting. There's so much literature in the mainstream medical field about the use of physical movement and activity to promote positive aging and address health concerns. And that can be, some people call it exercise, but some people call it walking with a friend, and some people call it Tai Chi in the park, and some people call it dancing in the kitchen. So just getting up and moving is incredibly important for everyone. And there's more and more interesting interventions coming out like that. Also, I think that using multidimensional frameworks of wellness to develop and provide services is really, really important. We just have to look at people holistically. We can't just look at their mental health or their physical health. It has to be both, and it has to be their spiritual wellness, and it has to be developmental and social and intellectual and environmental and occupational and all of those areas to make sure that we're really addressing the needs of this very complex population.
That's great, Michelle, and very interesting to hear about the move, no pun intended, the move towards physical activity. Sorry about that. Because I think too, sometimes you mentioned there might be earlier cognitive impairment that we see both as a result possibly of the mental health condition, possibly the medications, and then aging on top of it. And it seems that leaning in towards physical activity and movement could be positive interventions that don't rely so much on, cognition or reading or writing or those kinds of skill sets. So it's really interesting to hear that there's attention being directed in that area.
Well, and a lot of research for people at risk for dementia and Alzheimer's, they're using physical activity to improve executive functioning, or it has some promise in improving executive functioning and focus and concentration. So I think that more work needs to be done in that area for our population as well.
Wow, that's great. So it's kind of bi-directional then. It not only helps movement and physical activity not only help in general, but could actually be improving the cognitive abilities of individuals with serious mental health conditions. So sounds like that would be a really positive direction to go. So Michelle, as we kind of come to the close of our time together today, can you tell our listeners about how they could learn more about this topic?
Absolutely. SAMHSA, as I mentioned, has some great reports. There's one on the evidence for psychosocial interventions, but there's also a second report that came out in 2019 that talks about the behavioral health workforce and the needs for addressing issues for mental health, for people who are aging with mental health issues. Of course, our own Mental Health Technology Transfer Center, we have some great recorded webinars and products that we've done, I've done, and also some of the other centers have also done some nice work that people can check out for free. There is a National Council report on older adults and serious mental health conditions and behavioral health and looking at the future of service needs. We've also got the Academy of Peer Services. I just, as I mentioned, did some work with them to create a certificate in aging for peer providers. And that, if you live in New York State, you can get a certificate. If you don't live in New York State, you can sign up for free and take the class for free and get more information about how to support healthy aging and how peers can support that process. I'd also like to do a shout out to the E4 Center on Excellence in Behavioral Healthcare for Older Adults. They've got some nice resources and trainings available. And I believe that there will be a new center coming out soon on aging with serious mental illness.
And that's from SAMHSA, Michelle? Is that where
I
that
believe,
center would be coming from?
I think that will be coming from the Administration for Community Living.
Gotcha. Wonderful. So a lot of good resources there for our listeners to access, and that will be in the blog that we create and is available online.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Anything else that I missed touching on with you that you want to share?
No, I just really appreciate the opportunity to share my passion with everyone about older people aging with serious mental health conditions. And I think it's something that we all should care about and we'll all be in the mental health workforce touching upon at some point in our careers.
Well, thank you so much, Michelle, for all the wonderful information, for joining us, for sitting in the hot seat here, for being willing to be interviewed, and sharing this really critical information about services and supports for older adults and those aging with serious mental health conditions. It's been such a pleasure speaking with you. So thank you again.
Thanks very much, Anne.
This podcast is a production of the Northeast and Caribbean Mental Health Technology Transfer Center at Rutgers University and is made possible by funding from SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration.